Hi everyone, in today's video we're going to have a look at designers and their work and how that relates to your exam content. So this is going to be more on your paper 2, your hour and a half long paper, which is design principles. So what you need to know is basically each of the designs are going to go from this PowerPoint are the ones that could potentially come up on an exam. There are of course a lot of other designers out in the world that are quite famous, but these are the main ones that the exam board has said are the ones you're most likely to need. So you need to know what their design philosophy is, and then some examples of their most famous work, and the ones that are most likely to come up on exam papers. So the first one is a Frenchman named Felix Stark. So he's still an active designer. So a lot of his designs are what you call like quite playful and thought-provoking. So not necessarily taking it overly serious and decorative kind of things, but very unusual. He liked to play around with like modern materials and manufacturing processes, which is quite opposite to what like design movements like say arts and crafts would do, who would like kept like a very quote unquote like pure idea of design, so they keep everything very natural, like grained, everything's made by hand. Whereas someone like Felix Stark, all the new technologies, all the new materials, he try and embrace that and incorporate that into his designs. So his most famous design is what's called the Alessi Lemon Squeezer, which is this spaceship looking thing that you see in the middle of the screen. Now, this is a very common one to have on exam papers. It does come on quite a lot. And it's what's considered like an iconic design. But it does have some flaws with it. So a few of them being that it has quite a high centre of mass, hence like the main body at the top up here, which means it's quite unstable when you're actually physically using it because it might end up like falling over. It's the right size for a lemon, but it's too big for you to try and squeeze an orange in it. It's considered more of a display piece that you'd leave out in your kitchen, so rather than like use it, put it away. It's almost like a form of like 3D art, almost like similar to like having a poster or a painting you'd have on the wall. You'd have this, it would be almost like a centerpiece of like, oh look, I've got this kind of thing. Because originals are incredibly expensive. And then the idea being that you could put a glass underneath the bottom of it there and it would collect the juice that way. So it's a beautiful piece. It's just not an overly functional product, but then it's not designed to be overly functional. It's there to look nice, and it would match a lot of kitchens that nowadays that use a lot of chrome and that type of thing. So next is James Dyson. So he's obviously a very famous British designer and engineer. So his most famous original design is the DC01 vacuum cleaner, which is the one you see in the picture with. Well, not quite, because this has got the new ball design to it, but that was the first bagless cyclone technology vacuum cleaner, which he famously came up with the idea when he was on a bus and he saw the wind blowing. I think it was like blowing bits of rubbish, and he saw it all like twist around, and he scribbled the idea on a napkin. That's sort of like the legend of how he came up with the original idea. So his sort of key features of his design is like quite innovative technology, but not in new products, in like existing products. So things like the vacuum cleaner, hair dryers, or like things that already exist. He's taken and just tried to improve on them and make them better that way. So obviously his vacuum cleaner is the most famous one, but he is responsible for a wide range of domestic products. Things like hair dryers, hair straighteners, fans, like are all used quite a lot. Things like hand dryers that you might find as well. These are all very like domestic products that a lot of households have. A lot of designs have sort of the same sort of look, like the grey main body, which is supposed to look quite robotic and quite engineering based, and then like a key piece of colour. Obviously the vacuum cleaner, you've got the yellow, the hairdryer, you've got the pink. So it's meant to be grey and then like a splash of a little bit of colour that goes with it. Next is Margaret Calvert. So she's a very influential graphic designer. Now she's someone you may not have heard before, but you will see her work every single day when you leave your house. So she basically came up with the transport font and the standard pictograms used on pretty much every single road sign that you come across. So every single road sign you see on the motorway, most of the traffic signs you see, she came up with one, the font, and then two, the actual physical pictogram graphic that goes in the middle of it. She's still very, very active now, and her work is absolutely everywhere. So is definitely what you call an influential designer, because the stuff is just, when we say influential or iconic, it means it's just ingrained into our everyday like psyche, that we just see it all the time. We just accept it for what it is. So next we've got Datarams, who is a German designer. He's still alive. Whether he is still active or not, I can't really tell you. I'm not 100% sure if he's still active. He might still be, but he's what you would call a functional designer. He took quite a simple approach to design. So this is sort of almost the opposite of Felix Stark. He thought his design should always be functional but minimal at the same time. So the idea being that it's not over designed, it's not over complicated, it's not crowded on the design. He's not put design for design's sake. It's got to be nice and clean and work really, really well. He relies a lot on technological developments, always incorporates those into his designs. He did a lot of work in the past with with companies like Braun. His most famous design is the SK4 radio set, which is what you see at the bottom of your screen there. And he came up with what's called like the 10 principles of good design. And these 10 principles are used a huge amount in the actual industry today. There are exam questions that come up with the 10 principles as well, so it's vital that you know them. But he really is sort of like the godfather. Like, these are sort of like the 10 commandments, if you will, of what a good design should be if you're sort of down the route of Datarams' style of functional, minimalist sort of design. So his idea is that they should be innovative, so you're not just designing something and there's nothing new to it. It should be useful, should be aesthetic, should be understandable. What he means by that is it should be quite intuitive. You don't have to start getting a manual out to understand how to use something. It should be quite simple to just pick up and use. It should be unobtrusive, so quite unoffensive. It shouldn't be ugly. It should fit into what you're doing. It should be honest. It should have longevity, so it's not like a flash in the pan. It's not like it's popular for like a fad, like for 6 months and you chuck it away type of thing. Should be thorough down to the last detail, so every part, even like the really small features of a certain design, is all thought through. It's not just done the main bit and then at the end of the design process, he goes, we'll just whack this little bit on here. Every single part of it is thought through very, very well. It should be environmentally friendly and as little design as possible. That doesn't mean he's not doing anything. Again, it just means it's the whole idea of like minimalist design where nothing is overly cluttered, nothing is messy. It's all just very nice, clean and simple. So next you got Charles and Ray Arms. So they most famously are furniture designers. They have done other things as well. So their most famous thing is they've done the Arms Lounger, which is the one you see down here. So they did a lot of stuff with moulded furniture in plywood and plastics. They have been around for a huge amount of time. One of the most famous quotes they have is, "We don't do art, we solve problems." They were quite active in the war, where they actually designed mouldings not just for furniture but also for things like stretchers and gliders and things like that for soldiers, to kind of make it as cheap and easy to mass produce and transport, along with a lot of like biomorphic designs and ship to war zones. So basically make sure that it's like trying to problem solve in a war zone to like make it easier for people to get out okay. So, and the last one you got is Marianne Brandt, who was a student of the Bauhaus School. So if you're unfamiliar with Bauhaus, please look at the design movements video. So Bauhaus was a German design school who went by the idea of something called form follows function. So the idea that something should look nice, and then from the looks should be how it works should be the most important thing. Then how it looks sort of feeds from how it works. Her most famous design is the geometric pure kitchen products, which is what you see in the middle of the screen. So she was a German painter, a sculptor, photographer, a metalsmith and a designer. So she studied with Bauhaus and then later became head of the Bauhaus Metal Workshop in 1924. Today, her designs for household objects such as lamps, ashtrays, teapots are considered timeless, particularly for like the modern industrial style of design, where it was the first use of metal work and forming processes where things weren't made by hand. So those are the main designers and their work that have been going to come up on your exams. As I said, there are others that exist, things like Seymour Powell and Johnny Ive with the iPod and those sort of things. But these are what considered like the most iconic ones that could possibly come up in your exam, particularly Felix Stark and James Dyson, and Datarams like the main ones. But any of these could come up, so it's important you know who they are, what their sort of design belief was, and then again what their most common, most famous designs were. If you've got any questions, send me a message on Teams or email, and I'll get back to you.